small conference room, watching Grant Summers slide a severance envelope across the polished table like it was some kind of consolation prize. I had exactly 6 minutes to teach him the most expensive lesson of his corporate career. "Congratulations, Aaron," he said with that Stanford MBA smirk. "Your position has been eliminated, effective immediately. I'm Aaron Walsh, by the way, 48 years old, spent 22 years building the manufacturing systems that kept Midwest Manufacturing Solutions running like clockwork. But let me back up because this story starts way before this conference room. I looked at the envelope, then at Grant, then at the dozen faces around the table. Some couldn't even look at me. Others were watching like they'd scored front row seats to a demolition. Jordan Walsh's apprentice program fees were due next month. Ashley Walsh's nursing school tuition needed paying in 3 weeks. The mortgage had 9 years and 7 months left on it. Funny how your brain calculates these things when the ground shifts under your feet. 6 years in the Army Corps teaches you that when mortars start falling, you don't panic. You assess the situation, check your resources, and execute your contingency plan. Restructuring, Grant added, straightening his tie. You understand how competitive manufacturing has become. We're moving production to our new facility in Guadalajara. Yeah, I understood exactly how it was. I'd seen the paperwork last week. A draft contract for some 26-year-old industrial engineer straight out of college. His proposed salary was $48,000. Mine was $115,000. Same job description, just with fancy new buzzwords like lean optimization and digital transformation. When I joined Midwest Manufacturing 22 years ago, we were a small-time automotive parts supplier struggling to compete with the big guys. Grant's father had built the company from nothing, and Grant had big dreams of expansion. Problem was, he had ideas, but no clue how to actually make things work on a production floor. That's where I came in. Fresh out of the service, looking for a way to use my engineering background in civilian life. The Army had taught me how to build systems that work under pressure, real pressure, not the fake pressure of quarterly earnings targets. When you're setting up equipment while taking incoming fire, you learn to build things right the first time. Our automated production line was my baby from day one. I designed the safety protocols, wrote the calibration procedures, debugged every system that would have shut down any other operation. For years, Grant praised me in investor meetings. "Aaron's the backbone of this operation," he'd say. "Military discipline, knows how to get things done. Couldn't run this plant without him." Investors loved that story. The disciplined veteran building cutting-edge manufacturing systems. It played well in presentations. But about 8 months ago, something shifted. Grant started getting cold in meetings. My access to financial reports quietly disappeared. Conversations stopped when I walked into a room. The writing was on the wall when I saw those Guadalajara facility plans. Not just moving some operations, moving everything. 340 jobs, gone. Families that had worked here for generations, thrown away for cheaper labor costs. 3 generations of the Martinez family worked our assembly line. The Rodriguez brothers ran quality control. Steve Parker had been plant supervisor for 15 years, training kids like my son Jordan Walsh in the trade. That's when I realized Grant wasn't just replacing me. He was erasing everything we'd built, everything this community depended on. But here's what Grant didn't understand about military training. You always prepare for the worst-case scenario, always have contingencies, always have an exit strategy. See, our production line wasn't just manufacturing equipment. It was a living, breathing network that I'd architected to be both efficient and highly sensitive to unauthorized control. 8 months ago, when I started seeing the signs, I embedded something. Not malicious, that's not how we operated in the service, but protective. A safety protocol. If certain credentials got revoked, mine specifically, the system would assume hostile takeover and initiate automatic lockdown. Not destruction, not data loss, just offline. Everything. Production lines, quality control systems, equipment calibration databases. The whole operation would go dark until proper authorization could be reestablished. It wasn't sabotage, it was security. The same way you'd protect military infrastructure from enemy capture. I stood up slow, unclipped my security badge, and set it down gentle on that polished table. Around me, I could hear the subtle shift in breathing patterns. Tension rising, target acquired. "Grant," I said, letting the silence hang for a beat. "I suggest you pull up the production monitoring dashboard. You're going to want to see the countdown that just started." The room went dead quiet. "Excuse me?" Grant blinked. I smiled. Not the friendly kind. The kind you give when you know exactly how the next 5 minutes are going to play out. Check your system status. Clock's running. Someone opened their laptop. Someone else bolted for the door. Rebecca Martinez, our operations manager and former Navy logistics officer, went wide-eyed. She knew that look. She'd seen it before in theater when things were about to get interesting. That's when the panic started. Grant's fake confidence melted like ice in July. He jumped up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. Just straightened my jacket, picked up the little cardboard box they'd thoughtfully provided for my personal effects, and headed for the door. Inside the box were a few family photos, my Army coffee mug, and a small American flag Ashley Walsh had given me for Father's Day when she was 12. As I reached the doorway, I glanced back. Carl Rodriguez, our quality control director, was typing like his life depended on it. 2 technicians were sprinting toward the production floor. Grant was jabbing at his phone, probably calling someone who might know how to fix this mess. 5 minutes now, I said quietly, then stepped into the hallway. The elevator arrived just as my phone started buzzing. 4 missed calls already, all from numbers I didn't recognize. I stepped in, hit the parking garage button, and watched the countdown on my phone. 3:47 remaining. Right on schedule, the production line went dark. Not just the main assembly systems, not just the test equipment. The entire manufacturing network collapsed. Quality control offline, equipment calibration gone, safety monitoring dead. Midwest Manufacturing Solutions, the supposed leader in automotive parts production, just became a $125 million paperweight. I could picture Grant staring at his screen as error messages multiplied like wildfire. Engineers scrambling to reboot systems only to realize nothing was coming back online without proper authorization codes. The afternoon shift standing around confused as their workstations went blank. Steve Parker probably running between stations trying to figure out what the hell just happened. My phone vibrated again. This time it was a number I recognized. Rebecca Martinez, probably the only person in that building who understood what just happened and why. I let it ring. Not yet. Let them understand the scope of their problem first. Let them realize that the guy they thought was just another employee actually held the keys to everything they'd built, or thought they'd built, because the truth was, they hadn't built anything. I had. I drove home the long way. No rush. Even stopped at Murphy's Diner on State Street, the one where Linda Walsh gets her coffee before her shift at the elementary school. The waitress, Carol, asked how my day went. "Interesting," I told her. "Might be changing careers soon." She laughed, thinking I was joking. If only she knew the chaos unfolding 8 miles away was my doing. Well, technically it was their doing. I just built the consequences into the system. The house was quiet when I walked in. Linda Walsh was at her book club, Thursday nights with the other wives discussing whatever novel they'd picked this month. Jordan Walsh was at the plant finishing his evening shift in the machine shop. Ashley Walsh had study group at the nursing school until 8. Normal family life, the kind I'd been working 22 years to protect. By the time I set my keys down, my phone was going crazy. 12 missed calls from Grant, 6 from Rebecca, 5 from Carl. Text messages flooding in from numbers I didn't recognize. System down, production stopped. Need you back now. Emergency situation. I powered down the phone, ordered pizza from that place Jordan likes, and turned on the History Channel. Some documentary about D-Day logistics. Appropriate. The narrator was talking about how Allied success depended on precise coordination of thousands of moving parts. One breakdown could doom the entire operation. Around 6:30, Jordan Walsh came through the door. Kid's built like his old man but got his mother's brains. Plans to finish his apprentice program and maybe study industrial engineering part-time. He had oil on his hands and that satisfied look you get from a day of real work. "Dad, you're home early," he said, grabbing a Coke from the fridge. "Yeah, had some interesting developments at work today." He gave me that look kids give when they're trying to figure out if their parents are having a midlife crisis. "Everything okay? You seem, different." "Smart kid. Everything's fine, son. Actually might be better than fine soon. How's the apprentice program going?" "Good. Learned about hydraulic systems today. Steve Parker says I've got good instincts for troubleshooting." He paused, studying my face. "Where'd you learn that stuff? The way you always know how to fix things when they break?" I smiled. "From experience, mostly. And from understanding that every system has weak points, you just have to know where to look. Like what kind of weak points? Well, take our production line. Most people think it's just machines doing their job, but really it's a network. Everything's connected. Quality control talks to assembly. Assembly talks to calibration. Calibration talks to safety monitoring. Remove one key component and the whole thing stops working. The kid nodded, following along, like a chain, only as strong as the weakest link. Exactly. But sometimes the weakest link is also the most important one, the one everything else depends on. Jordan Walsh got it. Work ethic, integrity, understanding how things really operate, values that seem to be in short supply in corporate America these days. At 7:15 there was a knock. Deliberate, professional. I checked the peephole. Rebecca Martinez and Carl Rodriguez, both looking like they'd aged 5 years in 5 hours. Rebecca's usually crisp uniform was wrinkled. Carl's face was pale, stressed. I opened the door slow, just wide enough to read their faces. Well, this is unexpected. Social call? Rebecca's expression was tight, controlled. Classic Navy. Keep your emotions in check. Focus on the problem. Aaron, we need to talk. It's urgent. Seems sudden. Last I checked, my position was eliminated as of 4:30 this afternoon. Carl stepped forward. Former Marine Signal Corps, but he'd gone soft in corporate life. His hands were shaking slightly. Look, there's been a serious misunderstanding. I laughed, couldn't help it. A misunderstanding? Which part? The public humiliation? The severance envelope? Or Grant trying to replace our entire workforce with Mexican labor at a third of the cost? Rebecca winced. She knew. Of course she knew. She'd probably seen the same Guadalajara facility plans I had. Can we come in, please? This affects, everyone. The whole plant. All 340 jobs. I considered it. In the Army, when someone comes to your position asking for help, you listen, even if they're not in your chain of command, even if they sat silent while you got railroaded. Shoes off. They shuffled in like junior officers reporting to a commanding officer after a mission gone wrong. I gestured to the living room. Have a seat. Jordan Walsh peeked around the corner from the kitchen, curious about the late visitors. I caught his eye. Why don't you go upstairs, finish that math homework? He nodded, understanding the tone. When Dad uses that voice, you follow orders. I sat across from them, hands clasped, waiting. In negotiations, first person to speak usually loses. Another thing the military teaches you, let the other side show their desperation first. Carl cracked first. Look, the system, the entire production line, it's completely offline. Everything. Main assembly, quality control, even the safety monitoring. We can't even run basic diagnostics. It's a catastrophic failure. I see, I said, finishing for him. Full production shut down. Every line dead. Client orders backing up. Stock price probably taking a hit. Media starting to circle like vultures. Am I tracking this correctly? Rebecca leaned forward. Aaron, I ran the numbers. We're looking at breach of contract agreements with 80% of our automotive clients. Legal is saying 15 lawsuits minimum by morning. The board called an emergency session for tonight. Automax Industries is already asking questions, Carl added. Their procurement team called an hour ago. When we couldn't give them a timeline for restoration, they started talking about alternative suppliers. Sounds rough, I said. Carl rubbed his neck, nervous habit from his Marine days. This could kill the company, destroy everything we've built, hundreds of jobs. The Rodriguez family, the Martinez crew, all the apprentices like your son, Jordan Walsh. Their families depend on this place. Everything we've built. I tilted my head. Interesting choice of words, Carl. Remind me who designed the automated production systems? He swallowed hard. You did. And who wrote the safety protocols that keep this operation running 24/7? You. And who spent the last 8 months getting cut out of strategic decisions while Grant tried to outsource our jobs to Mexico? Rebecca jumped in. Look, Aaron, we know this was handled wrong. Grant was impulsive, but this can be fixed. You can fix it. I stood up, walked to the window. Through the glass, I could see Mrs. Adams watering her garden next door. Retired teacher, lost her husband 2 years ago, still waves every morning when I leave for work. This neighborhood, this life, It took 22 years of 12-hour days and missed family dinners to build. Can I? I asked, turning back to them. You have to, Carl said, desperation creeping into his voice. The safety lockdown protocol. I remember you mentioning it during system reviews. Something about unauthorized access triggering defensive measures. I smiled. You were paying attention after all. Yeah, it's a feature I built 8 years ago, standard security protocol. When my credentials got revoked, the system assumed hostile takeover and protected itself. Rebecca's military training kicked in. She was putting the pieces together. So you still have access? Of course I do. I built the authorization override the same year I put in the lockdown protocol. Figured if someone ever tried to lock me out of my own system, I might need a way back in. I walked to my laptop, opened it, typed a few keys. The production dashboard loaded. All red alerts, critical failures, system integrity compromised. Carl leaned forward, eyes wide. The whole network's down. Equipment data is isolated but intact. It's like the system is hibernating. That's exactly what it's doing, I said, turning the screen toward them. Protecting itself until proper authority can be reestablished. Rebecca met my eyes, and, what constitutes proper authority? I closed the laptop. That depends. I walked back to the window. Through the reflection, I could see them both waiting. Two decent people caught in the middle of Grant's corporate stupidity. Rebecca had served her country with honor before joining Midwest Manufacturing. Carl had done his time in the Corps, understood what it meant to keep critical systems running, but they'd also sat in that conference room and watched Grant humiliate me. Nobody spoke up. Nobody questioned the decision. Depends on what? Rebecca pressed. On whether this company is ready to acknowledge what it almost threw away, and whether it's willing to pay the price to get it back. Carl blinked. You're talking about terms. I'm talking about respect, I said. Something that seems to be in short supply around here lately. Rebecca pulled out her phone. Grant needs to hear this. I shook my head. No. Grant needs to come here. He wants his system back. He can ask for it properly. On my turf. My terms. Aaron? Carl started. He's not going to... He will, I interrupted, because right about now his phone's ringing off the hook with very angry clients asking very pointed questions about why their production schedules just went dark. Rebecca was already dialing. Through the phone I could hear it ringing and ringing. When Grant finally picked up, his voice was strained, desperate. Even from across the room I could hear the panic. Rebecca, thank God. Is he there? Can he fix it? The board is going insane. Automax is threatening to pull the contract. That's $45 million in annual revenue. Rebecca looked at me. I nodded. He's here, she said. But Grant, you need to come over. Now. And you better be ready to negotiate. Negotiate? This is sabotage. I'll have the FBI... Grant, Rebecca cut him off. Check the system logs. Aaron's security protocols activated when you terminated his access. This was an automatic response, not sabotage, and right now he's the only one who can fix it. Silence on the other end. Then, I'll be there in 20 minutes. Rebecca hung up and looked at me. He's coming. Good. Now we wait. Carl was pacing. Aaron, what exactly are you planning to ask for? Justice, I said, and insurance that this never happens again to me or anyone else. 25 minutes later, the sound of screeching tires echoed from my driveway. Through the window, I watched Grant's black BMW take the turn too fast, nearly clipping Mrs. Adams' mailbox. The man was unraveling. Rebecca and Carl had spent the last 20 minutes fielding calls. The scope of the disaster was becoming clear. Our biggest client, Automax Industries, was already threatening to pull their contract. The evening shift had been sent home. Someone from the Toledo Blade was asking questions. The company's stock price was dropping in after-hours trading. The knock came fast and angry. 3 sharp bangs that rattled the front door. I let it sit. Military discipline. Control the tempo. Control the engagement. Another round of knocking, more desperate this time. I opened the door just wide enough to see Grant Summers standing there looking like he'd been dragged through a corporate shredder. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, tie loosened, shirt wrinkled. The confident CEO who'd smirked while firing me 4 hours ago now looked like a man watching his empire crumble in real time. Fix it, he said, trying to push past me. Fix it now. I didn't move, just stood there blocking the doorway. Evening, Grant. Rough day at the office? His face went red. Don't play games with me, Aaron. Turn the system back on. You seem upset, I said, stepping aside slowly. Come on in. Let's talk about it. He stormed into my living room like he owned the place. Rebecca and Carl stood up from the couch, uncomfortable. They knew what was coming. Grant spun toward me, eyes wild. This is sabotage. Criminal destruction of property. I'll have the FBI here within the hour. Careful, I said, voice calm and measured. You're about to make accusations you can't take back, in front of witnesses. He stopped, jaw clenched, breathing heavy. But behind all that bluster I could see it, real fear, the kind that comes when you realize you're in over your head. Grant, I said, walking to my laptop, let me show you something. I opened the production dashboard and turned it toward him. The disaster lit up his face like a Christmas tree. Production lines 100% offline. Quality control breached. Pending contract violations 23 and climbing. Emergency board calls 4. This look familiar? I asked. His fists clenched. You did this. You sabotaged our system. Rebecca stepped forward. Actually, Grant, the logs show you revoked Aaron's credentials at 4:32 this afternoon. The system lockdown was an automatic response to unauthorized access attempts. Carl nodded, pulling up his own laptop. Here's the audit trail. When Aaron's admin privileges were terminated, the safety protocol triggered a protective shutdown. It's all documented. Grant's face drained of color. What safety protocol? I smiled. The one I implemented 8 years ago and briefed you on in the quarterly safety reviews. The ones you never attended because you were too busy playing golf with those Mexican facility investors. That's, he started, then stopped. Because deep down, he knew I was right. I walked to my desk, pulled out a thick folder. Paper records, old school. While we're being honest, Grant, let's talk about what else the system's been tracking. I opened the folder and spread documents across my coffee table. Access logs, file modification records, late-night login attempts. 8 months of unauthorized access to production databases, I said. Attempts to copy proprietary procedures, downloads of sensitive calibration data, all traced back to your personal login credentials. Rebecca leaned forward, scanning the documents. Grant, this shows you trying to clone the entire production database to an external drive. It's not what it looks like, he said weakly. Really? I pulled out another document. Because this email to your buddy at Capital Ventures Group suggests otherwise. Quote, working on extracting key personnel dependencies from production systems. Timeline for Mexican transition still on track. Carl went pale. You were planning this for months. Grant slumped into my armchair, looking defeated. The board was asking questions. Investors wanted to see cost savings. Your salary was... My salary was earned, I interrupted. Every dollar of it. While you were schmoozing investors, I was building the systems that made this company worth $125 million. Ashley Walsh walked through the front door, backpack slung over her shoulder, still wearing her nursing school scrubs from clinical rotations. Dad, I'm home. Oh, sorry. Didn't know you had company. Just finishing up some business, sweetheart. How was clinical today? Good. Worked in pediatrics. Think I aced the medication. Administration exam. She looked around at the tense faces. Is everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Why don't you grab some dinner? Pizza's still warm. She nodded and headed upstairs, but not before giving Grant a curious look. Smart kid. Could sense the tension in the room. That's my daughter, I said after she was gone. Ashley Walsh, 20 years old, nursing school honor student. Wants to work in pediatric care. Looks up to her dad because she thinks he's a man of integrity. I let that hang in the air for a moment. I'd like to keep it that way, I continued. Which means this gets resolved quietly, professionally, and fairly. No lawyers, no FBI, no media circus. Just a straightforward business transaction between adults. What do you want? Grant asked quietly. I walked back to the window. Outside, I could see Jordan Walsh's headlights pulling into the driveway. Evening shift was over. What I want, I said, turning back to face them, is acknowledgement, respect, and compensation for what you tried to steal. Grant looked up. How much? 20% ownership of production systems patents, $2.8 million in compensation for attempted IP theft, reinstatement as senior VP of manufacturing with a permanent board seat, and a public commitment that production stays in Ohio. His mouth fell open. That's insane. 20%. 20% of something is better than 100% of nothing, Rebecca said quietly, which is what we'll have if the system stays down much longer. Carl was doing math on his phone. Grant, Automax alone represents $45 million in annual revenue. If they walk, and they will walk, I added. Their procurement director called me directly 2 hours ago. Offered me a consulting position. Seems they'd rather work with the guy who built the systems than the company that fired him. Jordan Walsh walked through the front door, work clothes still on, carrying his toolbox. Dad, I'm home. Hey, isn't that Mr. Summers? Just finishing up some business, son. How was your shift? Good. Steve Parker taught me about pneumatic systems today. Said I might be ready for level 2 certification soon. He looked around at the serious faces. Everything okay? Everything's fine, I said. Why don't you get cleaned up? We'll talk about your certification over dinner. He nodded and headed upstairs, but not before shaking Grant's hand politely. Good kid. Respectful even when he doesn't understand the situation. That's my son, I said after he was gone. Jordan Walsh. 24 years old, apprentice machinist. Third generation to work in manufacturing. Proud of what he does. Proud of what we build here in America. Grant was quiet for a long moment. His hands were shaking now. $2.8 million. We don't have that kind of cash on hand. You'll find it, I said. Liquidate some stock options. Take a loan against company assets. Cancel that Mexican facility lease. Get creative. You seemed pretty creative when you were trying to replace 340 American workers with cheaper foreign labor. Grant looked around the room, at Rebecca's disappointed face, at Carl's nervous expression, at the documents spread across my coffee table proving his attempted theft. At the life I'd built through 22 years of honest work. Fine, he said finally. Draft the agreement. I smiled. Already done. I pulled a contract from the folder. Standard partnership agreement. 20% ownership, $2.8 million compensation, senior VP reinstatement, board seat. Production stays domestic. All it needs is your signature. His hands trembled as he picked up the pen. For a moment, I thought he might throw it across the room. But he didn't. He signed slowly, deliberately, like a man signing his own surrender. When he finished, he shoved the papers back at me. It's done. I looked at the signature, then at him. No, Grant. Now we're partners. And partners don't try to steal from each other. The next morning, I didn't walk into Midwest Manufacturing as an employee. I walked in as a 20% owner with a permanent seat on the board of directors. Word travels fast in manufacturing, especially when the guy you thought was finished becomes your boss overnight. The production floor was buzzing with activity and relief. 340 jobs saved, families protected, made in America preserved. Steve Parker was grinning ear to ear, telling anyone who'd listen how Aaron Walsh had stood up to corporate greed and won. 6 months later, Midwest Manufacturing posted record profits. Our production efficiency increased 23% after implementing the improvements I'd been recommending for years. Jordan Walsh completed his certification ahead of schedule and got promoted to junior technician. Ashley Walsh got accepted into the pediatric nursing program at Toledo Hospital with a partial scholarship. Grant's still CEO, but he's different now. More collaborative, more respectful. Turns out being partners forces you to think long-term instead of just quarterly targets. Some evenings I sit on my back porch with a beer watching the sunset over the neighborhood Linda Walsh and I built our life in. The mortgage is paid off. The kids' futures are secure. Linda's job is safe. But mostly, I'm proud that my kids learned something important. That competence matters, that integrity isn't negotiable, and that sometimes the right thing to do is also the smart thing to do. They tried to erase me from the company I built. Instead, they taught me exactly how much I was worth. Sometimes the most valuable thing you can do is know your worth, and be prepared to prove it when others try to throw it away. In a world that treats experience like overhead and loyalty like weakness, the smartest move is building your own insurance policy before you need it.